He looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're no longer needed at the company." No hesitation, no empathy, just corporate precision. Like I was an outdated file he needed to delete. I didn't say anything. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I just smiled. That confused him. I saw it. He expected me to break down, maybe beg, maybe get angry. But there was something hollow in his eyes that day, and something electric in mine. Because that smile, it wasn't about calm. It was about clarity. It was the moment I realized this man, the man I married, built a company with, shared my life with, didn't just stop loving me. He stopped seeing me. And maybe, just maybe, he never really did. But before we get into how I turned the tables on him, how his own father's will would come back to haunt him, I need to take you back to where it all began. Because my story didn't start with revenge. It started with love. And like so many women, I gave everything I had for that love. I gave him my trust, my time, my ideas, my name. And for a while, I truly believed we were a team, that we were building something together, brick by brick. I believed that the late nights, the arguments, the sacrifices, they meant something. That our dream was mutual, that we were equals. But what I didn't realize was that while I was building us, he was building himself, and I was just the scaffolding. For years, I dismissed the warning signs. You know the kind. Little moments. You brush off because you want to believe the best in someone. A meeting I was left out of here, a condescending joke in front of his friends there. The way he always referred to it as his company, even though I was the one who drafted the first proposal, pitched the investors, balanced the books, held it all together. But I swallowed it. I made peace with it. Because that's what we're taught to do, right? Be the bigger person, be patient, be loyal, be quiet. And I was. For a long time I was. Until I wasn't. Until the day he walked into my office. The office I designed. The office I worked late nights in while he was off golfing with clients I landed. And delivered that one, rehearsed line like he was reading from a PowerPoint slide. "You're no longer needed." He said it like he was doing me a favor. Like he was freeing me. And I smiled. Because I already knew something he didn't. Something buried in a document he never cared to read. A truth signed in ink by the only man who ever truly saw what I brought to the table. His father, the original founder. The man who brought me in before I was ever a wife. The one who pulled me aside in that second year and said, "You're the one with the real vision. Don't let anyone dim that." I didn't know what he meant back then. But I would. And that smile? That was me finally waking up to my own power. Because here's the thing about betrayal. It hurts. Yes. It burns. But it also purifies. It shows you who people really are, and who you really are, when everything comfortable is stripped away. So no, I didn't cry that day. I remembered. I remembered every deal I negotiated, every number I crunched, every silent moment I swallowed to protect his pride. And I realized it was never his company. It was ours. But soon, it would be mine. So if you've ever been discarded, overlooked, underestimated, I want you to lean in. Because this story, it's about to turn and trust me. He never saw it coming. We started as equals, or at least that's what I believed. I had the MBA, the strategy, the long nights with spreadsheets and pitch decks. He had the name, the smile, the legacy. His father was already a respected name in the business world. And I guess, back then, I thought I was lucky to be chosen. But now I look back and I see the pattern. I wasn't lucky. I was targeted. In the beginning, Everything felt like a partnership. We were both ambitious, both hungry to build something that mattered. I remember staying up past midnight with him, talking about market gaps, branding, product development, dreaming together like two kids who thought they could conquer the world with a whiteboard and caffeine. It felt like love. And maybe in some ways it was. But as the business grew, so did his ego. And mine? Mine started to shrink. Not because I wasn't capable, but because I made the mistake so many of us make. I confused sacrifice with love. I started giving up little pieces of myself to protect what we were building. I merged our accounts. I put some of my personal investments into the startup. I even gave up a lucrative offer from a Fortune 100 company. Because we had a vision. That's how I justified it. But somewhere in the cracks of our I started disappearing. At first it was small. Meetings he forgot to loop me into. Board calls where he introduced me as his wife instead of co-founder. Presentations where my slides were presented by his mouth, with not even a glance in my direction. It's strange how we excuse things in the name of love. I told myself he was just under pressure, that it didn't matter who got the credit, as long as the company succeeded, that he would make it right next time. He didn't. Instead, the dynamic started to shift. I would offer ideas and he'd shoot them down in front of others, only to present the same ideas weeks later, as if they were his own. People started addressing him in meetings, and not me. Clients began congratulating him on campaigns I led, and, still, I stayed. Because I thought maybe if I worked harder, if I became even more indispensable, he'd see me again. Not just as his wife, not just as someone behind the curtain, but as the woman who helped build the stage. I remember one night, we were in bed and I said, "Do you ever think we've lost the balance in our partnership?" And he laughed. Not in a mean way, not out loud. Just that little exhale people do when they're brushing you off. He said, "Don't overthink it. You're part of this because you're my wife. That's already more than most people get." I didn't respond. I rolled over and stared at the ceiling. That sentence played on loop in my head for days. You're part of this because you're my wife. Not because I had talent. Not because I earned it. Not because I built this company with blood, sweat, and sleepless nights. But because I married into it. That's when I realized the man I loved saw me as accessory, not asset. Still, I tried to make it work. We went to couples therapy. Once. He said it was a waste of time. I suggested hiring a business coach to help define our roles. He said I was being too emotional. I asked for equity restructuring to reflect my contributions. He laughed and told me, "We don't need paperwork between husband and wife. That's just toxic. Toxic, not ironic." What's more toxic than pretending someone's worth is conditional? Looking back, I think the worst part wasn't even what he did. It was how long I let him do it. How many versions of myself I buried trying to be digestible to him. How many ideas I silenced. How many moments I played small just to keep the peace. Because, deep down, I was afraid. Afraid that if I stood too tall, I'd be left alone. Afraid that if I pushed back too hard, I'd be pushed out. I kept choosing the marriage over myself. Until one day, I couldn't anymore. Because the red flags, they weren't waving anymore. They were on fire, and I was the one getting burned. But before the fire became an inferno, before the fallout and the fury, I was just a woman sitting in a corner office, wondering when she stopped recognizing her own reflection, wondering how the girl with the vision and the voice became the woman no one listened to. And that's the thing no one tells you about betrayal. It's not always a knife to the back. Sometimes it's death by 1,000 dismissals. And I had just about bled dry. The betrayal didn't hit me like a lightning bolt. It came in waves. Quiet ones, at first, so small I almost missed them. A snide comment in a meeting, a joke that made me feel invisible, a budget I wasn't consulted on, things that felt off, but not quite enough to fight over. You know how it is. When you've been with someone long enough, you start talking yourself out of your own instincts. He's just stressed. He didn't mean it that way. Don't overreact. But those waves kept coming. Board meetings where he cut me off mid-sentence. Staff parties where he introduced me as the wife instead of the co-founder. He even started correcting me in front of interns. Like I was the one who needed teaching. And every time I spoke up, he had a way of making me feel foolish. You're being sensitive. It's not that deep. You're reading into things again. I started to feel like a ghost in my own company. But nothing prepared me for the email. No phone call, no meeting. Just a cold, lifeless message with a PDF attachment. A termination letter. Subject line, Leadership Realignment Plan. It didn't even have my name spelled right. That's what broke me. Not the firing, not the loss of title or office or salary, but the fact that after everything, after the years I gave him, the business we built, the parts of myself I handed, over like free labor, he couldn't even bother to get my name right. I stared at that screen for I don't know how long. Maybe minutes. Maybe hours. It felt like time folded in on itself. My hands were shaking. My mouth was dry. I remember reading it over and over again, thinking it had to be a mistake, a misclick, a draft someone sent too early. So I walked down the hall and asked his assistant if he was in. She looked up at me with these wide eyes like she knew something I didn't. Or maybe she did, and just didn't know how to tell me. He's working. From home today, she said quietly. Of course he was. He didn't even have the decency to face me. That night, I drove to our house. The lights were off. His car was gone. I sat in the driveway with the engine running, hands frozen on the steering wheel. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But all I could do was sit there and feel the weight of it. This wasn't just professional betrayal. This wasn't just about a job. It was a surgical removal of my identity. An erasure of everything I'd built. Everything I was. I texted him. We need to talk. He replied 3 hours later. I think it's better we go through legal. Legal. Like I was some liability. Like I was a stranger trying to extort him. That's when I knew. It was never about us. It was always about him. I begged him later when I finally got him on the phone. I asked him to just talk to me. Just explain. You owe me that, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. He sighed. And what he said next, I don't think I'll ever forget it. You were always temporary. Just like that. Not angry, not spiteful, just cold, flat. Like he was stating a fact. Like I was the temp help he'd tolerated until it was convenient to let go. I think my heart stopped for a second. Or maybe it shattered. I don't know. All I remember is silence. That bone-deep, soul-crushing silence when someone you love confirms your worst fear. That you never really mattered to them. Not the way they mattered to you. He hung up before I could say anything else. And there I was, sitting on the edge of our bed, in the home we bought together, surrounded by walls we painted together, realizing I was completely, utterly alone. Not just in business, but in life. Because how do you come back from something like that? How do you breathe through betrayal that personal? He didn't just fire me from a company. He fired me from a marriage, from a story I thought we were writing together, from the future I sacrificed so much to build, curled up on the floor that night and cried until my body went numb. But somewhere in the middle of that sobbing, somewhere in the tight, aching chest and the gasping for air, a tiny voice in me said, "No more. No more silence. No more shrinking. No more making myself small to make him feel big. Because if he was capable of doing this to me, then he never deserved the version of me I gave him. And suddenly, I wasn't crying anymore. I was angry. Not the kind of anger that lashes out, the kind that rises, the kind that makes you remember who the hell you are, the kind that whispers, he may have erased you on paper, but he didn't destroy you. Not even close. And if he thought this story was over, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. Something inside me cracked open that day. And no, it wasn't weakness. It was clarity. The kind that hits you when the world stops pretending, when the mask drops, when all the illusions fall apart and what's left is just truth. I'd spent years wrapping my worth around him, around what I could be for him, what I could give him, what I could sacrifice to keep him happy, to keep us afloat, to keep the dream alive. I wore every role like armor: wife, partner, co-founder, peacemaker, problem solver. But in the end, none of it saved me. Because the truth is, it wasn't that he stopped loving me. It's that he never saw me as equal to begin with. And somehow, realizing that didn't destroy me. It woke me up. For the first time in years, I sat in silence. Not the kind that comes from swallowing pain, but the kind that comes from finally listening to your own voice. And my voice said, enough. Enough giving. Enough shrinking. Enough hoping he'd change. Enough molding myself to a man who couldn't even spell my name right in a termination letter. I wasn't going to beg anymore. I wasn't going to wait for closure that would never come. Instead, I started to remember. Not the pain, not the heartbreak, but me. I remembered who I was before I became his shadow, before I started second-guessing my brilliance, before I edited myself in every conversation just to make space for his ego. And somewhere in that remembering, something clicked. His father. Hadn't thought about him in so long. Not since the funeral. Not since the company transitioned. But a memory flashed through my mind. A late-night conversation, years ago. We were in the middle of a growth crisis, and his father pulled me aside and said, "You're the reason this company works. My son has charm, but you have strategy. I've written that into the plan." At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. I thought it was just a compliment. But now I wasn't so sure. So I started digging emails, documents, old files. I had access to more than he realized. He'd never bothered to revoke my admin credentials. And then, deep in an archived folder labeled Founding Documents, I found it. His father's will. It took me a few minutes to read through the legal language, but when I saw my name, my full, correct name, spelled out in the trust clause, I stopped breathing. It was all there. Recognition of my role in the company's founding. Confirmation that a portion of his shares were legally tied to my continued involvement. A stipulation that I couldn't be removed from leadership without majority board approval. And here's the twist. The board was evenly split, except for a single tie-breaking clause that placed the final vote with me. His father hadn't just seen me, he'd protected me. My hands were shaking when I realized what it meant. He couldn't fire me, not legally, not without triggering a breach of trust clause that could cost the company everything. He didn't just underestimate me. He forgot who built this thing beside him. He forgot that I wasn't a passenger on his ship. I was the one who mapped the course, built the sails, navigated every storm. And now, I was about to remind him, not with anger, with power. Because here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. There's something solid under your feet. And once you find it, you push off. I wasn't going to burn the company down. I wasn't going to make a scene. I was going to take it back, piece by piece, word by word, step by step. And I wasn't doing it for revenge. Not really. I was doing it for every woman who gave up pieces of herself for someone else's dream. I was doing it for the version of me that cried on the office floor, questioning her value. I was doing it because I remembered now. I was never just his wife. I was the backbone, the strategist, the force behind the vision. And now I had a plan. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the woman in the boardroom, with the truth in her hands and fire in her chest. And this time, he was going to have to watch me rise, not from behind him, but right in front of him. 3 weeks. That's how long it took. 3 weeks from the moment I found the will to the moment I walked into that boardroom, not as his ex-wife, not as the woman he discarded, but as something far more dangerous to a man like him, the majority shareholder. I didn't dress for drama. I didn't walk in with revenge in my eyes. I walked in calm, composed, but burning with something deeper than anger, certainty. Because while he'd spent years underestimating me, his father had seen it coming. Every manipulative move, every power grab, he must have known his son would try to edge me out. And he put protections in place, legal ones, binding ones. And now they were mine to activate. I remember walking into that room and locking eyes with him across the table. He was laughing about something when I stepped in, one of those loud, hollow laughs people do when they're trying too hard to look like they're in control. But when he saw me, that laugh died mid-breath. He looked confused at first, then nervous, then annoyed. "What are you doing here?" he said, barely masking his irritation. I didn't flinch. I slid the folder across the table to the corporate attorney. "Clause 14, I said quietly. "Let's begin there." The room went still. The attorney opened the folder, his brows lifted, slightly. Then he looked at me, then back at him. And he started reading, word for word, his father's will, the trust clause, the outlined protections, the legal tiebreaker status granted to me as co-founder, not as spouse, not as employee, as legal co-founder and strategic principal advisor. He looked stunned, like the floor had just opened beneath him. "What is this?" he snapped. "This is outdated. This doesn't mean anything." The attorney cleared his throat. "It means everything," he said. "It was never rescinded. Legally, she holds decisive voting power on any leadership changes, including executive removals or appointments. Your father locked this in. I didn't even look at him when I spoke next. I didn't come here to fight you. I came to correct a mistake." And for the first time in all the years I'd known him, he was speechless. See, that's the thing about men like him. They expect tears. They expect chaos. They expect you to crumble. What they never expect is poise. They never expect a woman to walk in, fully in her power, with nothing to prove, because the facts speak loud enough. I didn't yell. I didn't gloat. I laid it out like a professional. "We have 2 options," I said. "Option 1, you resign quietly, keep your severance, and exit with dignity. Option 2, I initiate a full internal audit, including the executive bonuses you authorized without board approval, and we let the chips fall." His face drained of color. He started to speak, but nothing came out. I waited. I didn't rush. I wasn't afraid of silence anymore. And after a long pause, he leaned back, eyes darting, calculating. You could see it. The exact moment he realized he'd already lost, he chose option 1. Of course he did. I watched him scribble his resignation with shaking hands. watched him hand it to the attorney without looking me in the eye. And when he got up to leave, he paused, like he was waiting for me to say something. Maybe a thank you. Maybe a goodbye. Maybe some flicker of softness. But I had none left. He walked out of that boardroom the same way he'd tried to walk out of our life story, with the assumption that he could write the ending. But not this time. This time, I held the pen. I didn't fire him in rage. I didn't ruin him publicly. I gave him the thing he never gave me. Choice. But that doesn't mean it wasn't justice. Because revenge isn't always loud. It doesn't always come with slamming doors or broken glass or screaming matches. Sometimes revenge is a woman reclaiming her name, reclaiming her power, reclaiming her place at the head of the table. And here's the thing no one talks about. That moment of quiet triumph. It's not just about proving them wrong. It's about proving yourself right. Proving that the voice they tried to silence still speaks. That the brilliance they tried to bury still shines. That the version of you they tried to erase never really disappeared. She just waited. Waited for the right moment. Waited for the right truth. Waited for the right plan. And then, she rose. After he left, the boardroom stayed quiet for a moment. No one knew what to say. So I stood. I gathered my things. And before walking out, I turned back to the people who once watched me fade into his shadow. I'm not here to play small anymore, I said. If you want to build something real, something fair, something strong, let's get to work. And just like that, it was mine. Not because I fought harder, but because I remembered who I was, because a man tried to erase me, and instead wrote my name into a legacy that couldn't be stolen. And the best part? He did it himself. He handed me the keys to the kingdom, because even in his arrogance, his father knew. And now? So did the lawyers. People ask me if I miss him, and the honest answer? I miss who I thought he was. I miss the version of him I built in my head, the partner I believed in, the man I hoped he'd grow into. I miss the shared jokes, the late-night work sessions, the way we used to dream like the world was ours. But I don't miss who he turned out to be. Because that man, the one who betrayed me, erased me, discarded me like I was a disposable asset, that man was never mine to begin with, and letting go of him, it didn't destroy me. It delivered me. It stripped away the fantasy and gave me something far more powerful than love. Truth. And through that truth, I found me. Not the me who tried to please or fix or beg for recognition, but the real me, the one who knew her worth long before she let someone else define it. The me who speaks without shrinking now. The me who leads without apologizing. The me who finally understands that being strong doesn't mean being silent. What he did hurt. Deeply. It shattered the life I thought I was building. It knocked the wind out of me. But it also forced me to rebuild, not just the company, but my sense of self. I poured myself into the business, not out of vengeance, but out of vision. I restructured departments, created space for more women in leadership, implemented mentorship programs for young professionals, especially women who were tired of being underestimated, and somewhere along the way, something unexpected happened. I started smiling again, not the forced, polite smile I used to wear like armor, a real smile, one that came from the inside, one that didn't ask for permission. I started saying yes to things I used to put off. Coffee with friends, travel, dancing, laughing for no reason at all. I started writing again, something I hadn't done in years. Just for me. No deadlines, no clients, just me and the page. And yes, I even started dating again. Not to fill a void, not to distract myself, but because, for the first time in a long time, I had love to give from a place of fullness, not desperation. And I learned something in that space between heartbreak and healing. Love isn't supposed to make you disappear. It's supposed to see you, hold you, nurture the fire in you, not fear it. I speak at women's conferences now. I stand on stages I used to sit in the back of, silently taking notes while pretending I had nothing to say. I mentor young women starting their own ventures. Some of them remind me so much of myself, full of vision and hope, and just a little too willing to dim their light for someone else's comfort. I tell them, don't make yourself small, just to make someone else feel big. Don't twist yourself into someone else's version of enough. And above all, don't wait to be chosen. Choose yourself. That was the hardest lesson for me, because I was raised on the idea that love is sacrifice, that being good means being patient, that your value is in how much you can give before asking for anything in return. But now I know better. Now I know that real love, in life, in business, in relationships, begins with respect, and that respect has to start with you. If you're listening to this, and you've been there, if you've been discarded, disrespected, silenced, or betrayed, I want you to hear me. You are not weak for loving. You are not foolish for hoping. You are not broken because someone couldn't see your worth. You are strong for surviving, for waking up, for daring to believe that your story doesn't end with heartbreak. Because it doesn't. Mine didn't. And yours won't either. What I went through broke me wide open. But through that breaking, I became whole. And that's the part they never expect. They think the betrayal will finish you. But what they don't realize is, betrayal is just the beginning. The real story? That's the comeback. That's the healing. That's the moment you rise from the ashes with nothing left to prove, just the truth of who you are. And when you rise not with rage, but with renewal. Not with bitterness, but with boundaries. Not with a scream, but with a smile. And this time, it's your smile. Not for them, not for show, but because finally, you are free. If this story touched something deep inside you, if you saw even a piece of yourself in my journey, then please, take a moment to support this space where real stories are told and real healing begins. Like this video if it resonated with your heart. Subscribe to the channel if you want more stories that speak truth, strength, and second chances. Share this with a sister, a friend, or anyone who needs a reminder that they are not alone, and they can rise again. And most importantly, leave a comment below. Share your thoughts, your story, or even just a word of encouragement for someone else reading. Your voice matters, and it might be exactly what another woman needs to hear today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, your pain doesn't define you. Your rise does.